Savi is a story about a woman who puts everything on the line for love. She risks becoming a criminal. She even risks her own life. At first, that sounds like loyalty, but as the film goes on, I started questioning her judgment. Is she going too far? Is she doing all this for the right reasons? Because she isn't just risking herself, she is now also risking her child's life. And that's where something begins to feel off. Love is supposed to give us clarity, it's supposed to help us see better, not less. When you are not operating from clarity and the truth, courage starts looking like empty recklessness. The beauty of the story then quietly withers away. And that's what happens to Savi. The film seems to lose its understanding of what real heroism looks like. Savi is actually a very interesting film. It has a good story, a good protagonist. I genuinely enjoyed rooting for her. The plot is also somewhat compelling. Her husband is in prison for an alleged murder he claims he didn't commit. There's no legal way to get him out, and now she has to do the unthinkable, break him out of prison. She's an Indian housewife, a person of color living in Liverpool. On paper, she's supposed to be powerless, harmless, invisible, and yet she finds a way to fight through sheer determination, through insane courage inspired by her love for him. It brought out that sentiment of how you could never abandon a loved one, how you could not stop yourself from doing everything to save someone you love. I loved this part, but by the end of the film, that feeling had strangely deflated. My faith in this character had dwindled. I kept wondering what happened from the start of the film to the end. Quick spoiler warning: if you haven't seen the film yet, I recommend watching it first and coming back to this. The main reason the film fizzles out is the husband's character. The film builds this suspense around whether he actually committed the murder or not. He insists that he's innocent, but the evidence is stacked against him. She loves him deeply and believes in him almost blindly. But then the film keeps showing us these moments that make him look like a bit of a loser. He gets overly rattled by a female boss who keeps giving him a hard time. He chooses to not stay out of danger in prison. It's not all his fault, but felt like he could avoid the worst of it. At moments when his wife and child are terrified, he throws what seems like small tantrums instead of holding himself together. There is a recklessness to him, an immaturity, and all of this keeps you unsettled. Not just about whether he is innocent, but about who he really is. By the end, we do find out that he didn't kill anyone. He is innocent. Her belief in his innocence is technically vindicated. But that revelation doesn't undo what we have already been shown. For example, after being beaten almost to death by a gang in prison, they promise to leave him alone if he does not pursue legal action, or some such. She begs him to stay out of further danger. She's already panicking, already traumatized, already alone, already carrying everything. And instead of prioritizing her fear, he tells her that he will not back down. Some sort of misguided bravado. He leaves her even more terrified, alone with the child, carrying the weight of the consequences he doesn't seem to fully grasp. Let me take this a step further. In a crisis like this, a grown man, no matter how broken his life feels, has to prioritize his family's safety. He needs to think in terms of solutions. Maybe he insists that they go back to India. Maybe seek help from family or friends to help her. Maybe research legal options from prison. Find the best lawyer. Create some sense of stability so that your child has at least the illusion of safety. But we don't really get that from him. What we get instead is what I can only describe as boy energy. She's the only one thinking strategically. She's the only one thinking long term. So yes, he didn't kill anyone, fair enough. But then, who is he? He comes across as immature and reckless. And for this man, she is risking literally everything. Becoming a criminal herself and endangering her child's future, maybe even his life. Honestly, that doesn't sound very wise. It doesn't sound grounded. It doesn't actually sound like a loving thing to do either. So what's driving her? The film's answer seems to be attachment. She's deeply attached to her husband, and that attachment fuels both her courage and her recklessness. I can understand why some people like this ending. We honor her devotion. Fair enough. But this is where the film betrays the original tale. And by that I don't mean the French film it is remade from. There's a line near the end of the film where she says that Savi is short for Savitri. And the Anil Kapoor character replies, "How appropriate," or something like that. This is clearly a reference to the Mahabharat story of Savitri and Satyavan. Now, to be fair, the film never explicitly claims to be an adaptation. But when you invoke that name and when your story mirrors the idea of a woman saving her husband from certain death, you are inviting comparison. So I went back and looked at the original story. And what I found was very revealing. In the Mahabharata, Savitri is a princess who is radiant and brilliant. She meets and rejects many princes because she finds no connection with them. Then she meets Satyavan. Satyavan is also a prince, but his father has lost his kingdom and they live in hardship. But Satyavan takes care of his parents through that hardship. And the way Satyavan is described matters. He is not remarkable because of power or success. He is remarkable because of his wisdom, his nobility, his inner strength. He lives through hardship with grace. He fulfills his responsibilities without resentment. This is crucial. Savitri is not inspired by attachment to him. She is inspired by who he is. She recognizes the rarity of true integrity in a seemingly ordinary man. And that recognition awakens something in her. And that's why she is willing to go ride or die for him, as we would say today. Not because she's blind, but because she sees clearly. The original myth is telling us something very precise. In a corrupt, narcissistic world, a good man, because he is rare, is worth fighting even the cosmic forces for. Good people are rare. If you find one, fight like Savitri. That's who Savitri was. She didn't just identify goodness, she went to war for it. So now you can see how these are fundamentally different stories. In Savi, her devotion feels rooted in attachment. In the original myth, her devotion is rooted in clarity. One is driven by emotional fusion, the other by moral recognition. One feels confused, the other feels awakened. A strong Savitri requires a strong Satyavan. And this is where the film makes its biggest mistake. When Satyavan is diminished, Savitri becomes unintentionally naive. In the original story, she chooses well. She sees what others cannot. She is wise, intuitive, brave. Her devotion is not blind, it is enlightened. She represents the divine feminine in full clarity, not confusion. But in the film, her devotion is directed towards someone who doesn't seem like he has earned it. She risks everything for a man who doesn't bring enough value back to the family. Even at the end, when she breaks him free from the hospital, he still feels like dead weight. This was his moment to rise, to finally show up. But the film barely gives us that. We only get quick glimpses in montages. And because of that, all I really saw was a man who never really shows up. By weakening Satyavan, the film accidentally insults Savitri. When trying to save him costs her ability to think clearly, especially when her child's safety is on the line. The woman's devotion stops looking like wisdom and starts resembling a trauma bond, delusion. When you place the original Savitri beside Savi, the contrast is almost painful. It's not just a reinterpretation. It's a collapse of the values that gave the original story its meaning. The difference is subtle. Where does Savitri's motivation come from? But it changes how we see everything. Well, you might say, this is a modern realistic take. People like Satyavan don't exist anymore. And I honestly think that misunderstands the ancient stories. The Mahabharata was never describing a perfect world. It was full of narcissism, ego, violence, betrayal. That's exactly why characters of integrity mattered. True heroism was always about seeing the world clearly and still choosing to fight the hard fight, the losing fight, the good fight. People like that were rare even back then. That's why their stories became epic. Fighting for the truth is beautiful. Fighting for attachment blindly is painful because it doesn't uplift you to the truth. It keeps you languishing in darkness. In the climax, we see the family of three sailing away to freedom, leaving the police behind. It's framed as a beautiful moment, the kind where we are supposed to celebrate that they pulled off the impossible. But instead of relief, I felt a little uneasy. I wasn't sure how safe they really were. And honestly, I wasn't sure how reliable he was, because now the wife and the child may spend their lives running from the law, all while hoping that the husband's presence is worth that cost. We can only speculate about the writer's choices. Maybe they weakened the husband so she could shine more. But here's the irony, she would have shined more if he had shined too. This feels like a casualty of the gender war. Perhaps in trying to diminish him, they accidentally diminished her. And that's really what I wanted to share. One story becomes epic, the other one loses steam. Just because we live in a dark, narcissistic world doesn't mean we have to dilute our heroes into codependency. In fact, the darker the world, the more spiritually powerful the good people become. The ones who see clearly and still choose to fight. So maybe that's the real question for our filmmakers. Do you not believe that the real heroes exist anymore? And if we are living in some of the darkest times, shouldn't we be showing the rare people among us who shine the brightest instead of diluting them? And if you want stories that stay in our hearts and memories, those are the characters we have to find. Maybe what we need are filmmakers who still believe in the unflinching power of truth and in emotionally healthy people. Because if you don't believe such people exist, or if you think they are boring or insignificant, you end up diluting characters in the name of being realistic. And the stories built on naive, immature choices will always feel smaller. They will never be epic. Replacing a spiritually educated character with a codependent one isn't reinterpretation. It's incompetent at best and dishonest at worst. You cannot just borrow the spiritual and moral power of a story without fighting for the light the original story stood for. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.